Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where you can be, belong, and become the very best version of yourselves. So, wherever you're joining us, again, we want to welcome you. This is what we do, right? We move through the Bible. We find deeper pictures and images and ideas. We look at the context. We ask, what was the author thinking when they wrote it? Who were the people? Who's the audience? All of that is important when we view these ancient texts. And so that's what we do here at Ethos Online. We go verse by verse. We study deep. And so, again, if you want to be a part of this, if you want to financially support this, look at the links below there. Walk with us, journey with us, partner with us. Again, if you want to follow the links every time we have a new one, you'll see the little links below on the YouTube channel. All of that there. We'd love for you to partner with us. Join us as we do this every week. And please share these videos. So we're moving again through the story of Genesis, right? The entire book. And what we found is, Leo and I, we've been joking about this. It actually, it's been a couple months, right? And we will continue going through the book of Genesis. We're only on chapter 3, right? It's nuts. We're only on chapter 3. We're gonna finish chapter 3 in a couple more times. But it's taken that long because there's just so much there. And again, not that we just delve into it for the sake of delving into it. There's a real meaning and application you can bring to today. And so Genesis is written from a tribal group of people, right? This Middle Eastern tribal group of people who call themselves the Israelites. And this group of people, like many nomadic tribes, they are overtaken over and over again by whichever empire of power is at the seat of the throne during that time era. And so Babylon, right? Our story starts, Genesis really begins with Babylon. Babylonians come in, they take the Israelite temple, they destroy much of their culture, they make them march hundreds of feet, hundreds and hundreds of miles on foot. They do that all in 587 BC. And again, they get to the city of Babylon. And when they get there, they're noticing all these other tribes. And again, the normal thing to do would be their God beat our God, so we will begin worshiping their God. We'll take on their traditions. And this is why many tribes, essentially, you don't hear about them anymore, right? They're kind of eaten up, consumed by whichever large empire was of that time period. Israel, however, finds a way to hold on to what it means to be Israel, what it means to be a Hebrew. And so for them, the Torah, all these writings, it's not about history. They're not writing a history, but they're writing in a response so that they don't assimilate, right? They don't forget who they are. They don't forget the traditions, the recipes, all of that. They want to hold on to it, so they write Torah. And so again, Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament for Christians, Torah was a beautiful compilation, right? Of poetry, mythology, prophetic musings, warnings, so much symbolism and metaphor. It was packed with it all. And again, they're writing it while they're in Babylon. So again, this is not a historical telling. They're not looking back and saying, now, if I remember correctly, I believe Abraham did this and this on this date, and Moses did this and this on this date. No, that's not the point. They're telling the stories, right? And they're telling the stories not for historical accuracy. They're telling the stories in order to keep the tradition, keep Judaism Jewish. That's the point. That's why they're writing it. And so again, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized. So every character, every story is going to give you some kind of introduction or idea about what Israel holds to be true. What Israelites are made of, right? That's the idea here. And you can see Israel in almost every single character all throughout the Old Testament. And it's really pretty interesting. And when you do that, when you view it that way, the whole thing pops. You're no longer asking these weird questions about, how was the earth made? Is it 6,000 years or not? Those are not even on your radar anymore because you're going deeper. You're looking for the deeper meaning behind the story, right? Because that's what it was. And so Genesis, we understood Genesis 1, it's all about Israel's God being different than Babylon's God. Babylonians are all about chaos, destruction. That's their God. Israel's God says, nope, I step into the chaos, I create order, I clear the table, I begin filling the table. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Israel's God is different. Now, understand again, Genesis 1 is a poem. And you'll see all throughout Genesis, there are places where there's poetry, there's literary devices, there's metaphor. All of this is there. And so when you understand how Hebrews write, why they write, all of that, the whole thing pops. Genesis 2 and 3, we understood again, this is more like campfire tellings, right? Not history books, but it's like people sitting around telling stories. And again, stories to capture the values of what Israel is. Again, it's like grandpa and grandma or great Uncle Jack, sitting around and saying, I remember the fish story. They're not telling the fish story to tell a fish story. They're not telling the fish story around the campfire to historically accurately tell you about the family. No, they're telling you the fish story because there's a deep, valuable lesson there. Maybe someone did something while camping, and now Uncle Jack has an opportunity to share a story that has a deep message that maybe you can learn from. That's the picture. That's the perspective. And really, it makes sense. Because again, when you look at Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, they don't add up. They don't match, right? If you were to take one of them literally, then the other one would have to be thrown out because the other one wouldn't be historically accurate. Yeah, even the days of creation don't match up. And so we're going to delve into now Genesis 4, 1 through 10. And again, I find this such an interesting passage. So here we go. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man with the Lord. And she continued to bear his brother Abel. And Abel was shepherd of flocks, and Cain was a tiller of the soil. It goes on. Now it came to pass at the end of days that Cain brought of the fruit of the soil an offering to the Lord. And Abel he brought of the firstborn of his flocks, and of their fattest. And the Lord turned to Abel and to his offering. But to Cain and to his offering he did not turn. And it annoyed Cain exceedingly, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said to Cain, Why are you annoyed? And why has your countenance fallen? Is it not that if you improve it, it will be forgiven you? If you do not improve, however, at the entrance sin is lying, and to you it is its longing, but you can rule over it. And Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. First murder, right? And the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? Again, it should remind you of the story we just read, right? Where are you, Adam and Eve, right? And he said, I do not know. I am my brother's keeper. And he said, What have you done? Hark, your brother's blood cries out to me from the earth. So let's go section by section here. So let's look at this beginning part. First off, Cain and Abel, right? Two different names, but if you are a Hebrew person, you are very connected to names. Names have deep meaning. We understood this with Adam and Eve, right? We spent a whole section talking about that, just those two names. Cain and Abel actually have some really deep meaning. And so look at this. Abel was a shepherd of flocks, it says. Cain is a tiller of the soil. Notice this. Cain, all about getting his hands dirty, right? This should remind you of someone, right? Cain, the word Cain here, it actually means, it's very fascinating to me. It means someone who works with their hands, but also there's a connotation to he works with metal. And so if you know anything about farming, you'll know that they had these big metal tills and everything else they would use, spades, and they would just dig up the dirt. And they'd use the metal to do this, right? And for them, again, Cain, if he's going to be a farmer, he's going to be one that uses metal, right? Iron. He's going to be fighting with the dirt, with the soil constantly. That is Cain. And if you remember, this is the curse, right? This is the curse that falls on Adam. And again, for the rabbis, this is an observation, right? But Cain is a reminder of this curse. You will be tempted, right, to find your value in what you do. Whereas Abel, look at Abel now. Abel's a shepherd. Abel, the word means morning mist. Yeah? It's so good. Morning mist, a shepherd. Everywhere he goes, he's nurturing. He's bringing life. That's the idea. You have Cain here. You have Abel here. Again, Cain, much like Adam, right? After the fall, right? After the curse, Cain works, toils, and he finds his identity in what he does. An absolute, it is an absolute slap in the face to the idea of the beginning, where our identity is found in who we are, right? Who we've been made. That's the beautiful idea there. But Cain and Adam have kind of moved away from that, haven't they? And for Abel, this idea of shepherds for ancient people, tribal people, a shepherd is someone who is going out into the fields. They're looking, they're meditating, they're seeing the divine everywhere they go, right? And they're bringing with them these sheep. And the sheep are expecting what from the shepherd? Yeah, protection. The shepherd's going to lead them to still waters, right? The shepherd's going to lead them to grass and to food. This is what a shepherd does. He brings life everywhere he goes to the followers he has, the sheep. And it's really pretty beautiful. But think about this now. If you are an ancient person, you hear about a farmer, and you hear about a shepherd, you know immediately what's going to take place. At some point in time, the shepherd is going to cross the farmer. They're going to cross land. They're going to have arguments. We see this over and over historically. This happened all the time. This created wars with tribes. Yeah, pretty soon my sheep start crossing over into the farmer's territory, and before you know it, families are feuding. There's war, there's blood. And so for an ancient mind, when they see this drama beginning to unfold, they're seeing at some point blood's going to be spilt. It's going to be over ownership. It's going to be over land. It's going to be over mine, right? And so we have two very different ways of walking in the world. It goes on. Now, it came to pass at the end of days. Now, right? End of days. Many of us grew up with this whole idea like end of days. This is the end of the world, right? End of days, reference to Revelation, end of days. Very obvious little point here. This is the same word, by the way, the same concept used in Revelation, just in Greek, right? So end of days does not mean the end of world, right? Because if this was truly the end of days, meaning the end of the world, then our story would have finished there, wouldn't it? Yeah. It obviously is not about the end of the world, but when you look at the concept behind these words, here's what it means. It means the end of an era, which again fits really well with Revelation. When Revelation is talking about the end of days and all this, it's talking about the end of an era, an oppressive era. Yeah. And so for them, though, it came to pass at the end of days, there's an end of an era that's happening here. And Israel's about to step into a new era. And it may not be a great era, right? There are going to be some changes and some shifts, some brokenness. The end of the era, that's, again, what they're reading. They're seeing themselves in the story. Yeah, beautiful. And so, end of days, again, not some weird future prediction, not at all. Not the point. Now, it goes on, and I always had a problem with this one. Bringing the sacrifice to God. You ever wonder, like, why does God, right? Why does this God need a bloody sacrifice? Like, where did this come from? We've never seen it. This is the first thing. Where did they get the idea that they're supposed to sacrifice, right? This is angry God from up above, right? The picture, I think, is perfect. Where do we get this idea? Well, here's the thing. Again, this is written while they're in Babylonian captivity. They are inserting their traditions and their culture. This is not a history book. At the beginning of the world, when all this, they did not all of a sudden think, we should probably give God our blood sacrifices. No, this is something that has evolved with a tribe over years and thousands of years. And what we see during that time era is most tribes gave some kind of sacrifices to their gods. Some of them were human, right? Many of them were human. Many of them would use slaves, right? Many of them would give their very best livestock. And this is what Israel chooses to do. And so they insert their tradition in the metaphor, the deep story. This is not literally the divine begging for human or animal sacrifices. Not the point at all. They're inserting their traditions into the story. And that's where this is coming from. So it doesn't bother me anymore. I hope it doesn't bother you. So here we go. Notice this now. We talked about Cain. He is the metal worker. Now watch this. Because again, they're inserting their tradition into the story. So watch. Deuteronomy 27, it says this. 27 verse 5. Build there an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. Do not use any metal on them. Build the altar of the Lord with your God with field stones and offer burnt offerings to it to the Lord. Sacrifice fellowship offerings there, eating them and rejoicing in the presence of the Lord your God. So notice this. Don't use metal on the altar. Why is this important? Well, notice this. Who uses metal? Yeah, this guy, right? Cain, this guy uses metal. He brings metal to the offering. And here's why this is important, because this, you may be thinking, what are you talking about, Tony? Where are we going? Here's why this is important. Again, in Deuteronomy, the reason we don't use metal on an altar is because the altars are they're made of stones, and then what the Israelites would do is really fascinating. They would actually put plaster around the stones. And what they would do is, around the stones, they would actually begin to engrave the law, the wisdom writings. They would engrave them onto the plaster. And if you used metal on this thing at some point, it would actually break it down. And so they would use their fingers, right? They would use objects that would not break the plaster. So you don't bring metal to an altar, especially ones that have been used over and over again. If you did, you would break the wisdom writings. Come on. So let me make it clear. You have Cain and you have Abel. Abel is this beautiful picture of following the wisdom writings, right? Knowledge and wisdom walking together. Passion, right? Energy, fire, and wisdom joining together, walking together. This is, again, another picture of the Adam and Eve story. What happens when one chooses to go the other direction? What happens when one overpowers the other? What happens? And so, again, this is the concept. Cain brings metal. He brings iron. He brings the metal that's going to rip up the wisdom writings. It's going to break them down. It's going to chisel away at them. And so notice this. But Cain and his offering, he did not turn, right? God is not pleased with his offering. Not because he's literally needing to have an animal sacrifice. He's not bloodthirsty, right? Not the point. The bigger picture is the wisdom writings are being chiseled away. That's why their God is unhappy. Yeah, that's the bigger picture. And when you get it, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. And so this God gives Cain a warning here in these verses. The thing you're about to do, Cain, it's about to steer you in the wrong direction. I am giving you a wisdom warning, Cain. Think about what you're doing. Don't chisel away at the wisdom. If you do, we're going to head in some pretty painful experiences. And I think all of us know that. We hear the wisdom, right? Someone gives us the warning. Someone who has walked the path before. And we have the choice. We can listen or we can say, I know better. All right, I know better. Yeah, and this is the reason why years later you'll look at your parents and you'll say, oh, that's why they said the thing they said. Yeah. And at this point, God is saying, don't chisel Cain. Don't chisel away the wisdom writings. But what does Cain do? It says here, Cain instead rises up. He kills his brother in cold blood, right? Again, this is a story, right? A story. But the story says this brother murders his brother and allows passion to guide him instead of wisdom. And that's the story of Israel. Every time Israel allows their passions to lead them, knowledge, right, without wisdom, they always end up in exile. Always. They always end up pushed out of the garden. They always end up going east. And this is why you'll see Cain has to leave. And we'll talk about this next week. But Cain's going to have to leave. And he's going to go east of Eden. Again, away from life. Because he chose to delve deep, break the wisdom writings, run away from them, allow passion to guide him over wisdom. And so the question, of course, I want to bring with you today, the way that I think we can bring it home, make this applicable is this. How do we control our passions? Because many of us have them, right? Right now, it's 2020. It's October right now. And many of us, we're watching debates where two hotheads are yelling at each other. It's crazy. People are at an all-time high of just anger, passion. People are doing things. They're angry. They're all this stuff is happening. And if we don't allow wisdom to guide us, we could easily be steered in the wrong direction. And so here's a couple ideas from a really interesting source I found. One of my favorite writers, he says there's a couple ways we can do this. Number one, ask this question. Is this an issue I've faced before? Whenever you find yourself angry, annoyed, you're ready to explode over something that just happened, ask yourself, have I faced this thing before? This thing that's deep in me that I'm finding myself angry and frustrated over, have I been there before? Why do I keep ending there, right? Why do I keep ending up with this thing? Why do I keep bringing it up? What's the point, right? Have I been there before? Is being there a good idea? Ask yourself those kind of questions first. Number two, he says, what were the consequences of the decision last time? Maybe you made a decision. Maybe you chose to respond in a certain way. Did it work? Was it a good response? Did you allow your passions, your anger, all of that to ruin a friendship, a relationship, whatever? Did it work? Because if it didn't, maybe we don't repeat it. Yeah. Number three, do I really want to go there again? Yeah. Asking yourself a question like that, do I really want to go there again, might just cause you to shift the way that you choose to handle the situation. The anger, the passion, the energy, whatever, it may cause you to shift your decision. And then lastly, what do the wisdom voices of my peers tell me right now? What would they tell you? What about all those books you've been reading about human betterment? What about the Bible? What about all of that? What would they say to do right now? Right? What would my favorite leader say right now in this situation? Right? What would my mentors say to do right now? I think if we ask ourselves that question before we react, before we jump into something passionately, I think life would follow. Rather than shipping away at wisdom, jumping far into, far east of Eden, if we could just start asking questions of the thing, I think we might end up in some really good places instead of where many of us end up. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This book is powerful, isn't it? There's so much beauty, but also there's a lot of application. And so if you want to continue traveling with us, working with us, supporting what we do, we show this slide every week. We think it's important. Again, we do so much to make this happen every week. And so please consider donating, ethos-church.org/donate. This is tax deductible. And so please consider donating monthly if you could. That would be amazing. Weekly, whatever works for you. But it really does help us continue sharing these messages. Ethos Living Rooms, again, another announcement about that. The 1st and the 3rd of every month, we continue doing these live sessions. And right now, during this time in 2020, so important to do. And so wherever you find yourself, whenever you're watching this, it might be a year from now, hopefully we're still doing it, but join us. Email me. Let me know if you want to join us in this conversation. We discuss things together. It is so fun. Even if you're not someone who loves to insert your opinions and talk and share, if you just want to be a wallflower, right? Just kind of relax and enjoy the conversation. That's okay too. That's okay too. And always, please consider subscribing. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button, the bell. follow us on YouTube. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us over this conversation in the book of Genesis. Take care, and we'll see you next week.